So sorry guys, I'm gonna roll because I'm starting to get tired and I need to go to a meeting tomorrow morning. And the other thing, so sorry if I speak slowly sometimes, but it's not a language barrier because I speak slowly in French anyways. So,
Oh, you're great. You're great, Phil.
yeah.
No.
I
But
was just
appreciate
making a
Good luck
note.
with that, Phil.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna roll. So take it easy, guys, and see you next week.
myself, Phil. Thanks for joining, and good luck in your meeting tomorrow.
Yep. See you, Phil.
Awesome.
See you next week.
Catch you later, man.
Thanks.
So here I've got a picture of the supposed honeyboo, and I was going over this with Jeremiah the other night, and it actually makes a crazy amount of sense and completely within their original means. And we see here, it's actually a ionic electrode, aka we have a plasma fire engine or a jet thruster engine. So it's jet propulsion, right? It's like a rocket propulsion essentially on the first models. And that then you have this ion plasma vortex. So it's a combination of Tetons and browns, electrostatic charge off the top to the bottom, then coming in and getting fed by the upward thrust of the jet here, which is then charging it and giving the the overall fields and ionization that extra push and pull effects on it. And that then when taken in with this one right here, well, that actually would make sense. And you have the rocket thruster there going through the center, and then the middle would be spinning, absolutely, where the people would be sitting. And yeah, it. Why don't we see disc craft anymore? We believe and suspect it's because it was all human technology, and that it's the older models, right? And that now these things are outdated, and that supposedly Tesla had a style of disc craft. There was OdySee car with his model. I guess this is George Adamski's model there. And also supposedly John Searle made a similar one, just a replica or a smaller one, that when they fired it up, it flew off into nowhere.
Right. Well, why rely on something semi-mechanical when you could modulate?
Well, exactly. That's why we don't see them anymore, is because we figured it out. And so here's OdySee cars type, where it's a bunch of charged off balance gimbal systems, but also what am I talking? Like a top, like a spinning top sort of thing that he charged. Here's another one that's like, I guess this was like the American one that they did with the jet engines and the propeller in the middle that didn't really go anywhere, but that's all they showed.
It did hover in their defense. It did hover.
Yeah, it barely hovered, but it's that they released that while there was all of these other ones that actually did work. Here's another, sadly it's pixelated, but of the Honeyboo original. And here we have patent by
Bernie, I'm gonna have to take off in about 5 minutes here. So
Okay, Mr. Mike. Well, thank you for joining in. I realize very late
Yes.
there.
yeah, it's almost 1 o'clock. I gotta go to the hospital again tomorrow. So, but thanks for having me on, anyways.
Yeah, and prayers with your family and your dad there that makes the recovery. Hey, Lulu,
Yep.
feel free to join. You post the link here.
Yeah,
Before
best to your dad, Mike.
Yeah, thanks.
Now, Bernie, I think that the one mechanical aspect of that sort of technology that, I'm not saying it's impossible to do away with because, again, modulation, but I feel like the gyroscopic movements to have those extra, movements tends to be a potentially critical aspect of the cores of these things. That might have been a mid-stage type model, but,
exactly right, and that there are many. I'll see we got TT Brown. Oops, right.
Yeah, I'm
There we go.
gonna take off, guys. Have a good night,
Okay,
alright?
Mike.
Yeah, we'll see you
Prayers
next
with
week.
you and your family, good sir. Thank you
Thanks.
for joining. But yeah, no, I fully agree, Joe, that it's like there's several different versions of this going from the 40s to the 70s. Oh, hello, Mr. Mission Control. Oh, I'm gonna have to mute you until. Sorry, Mission Control. I had to mute you until you turn off your YouTube channel because it's getting mad.
Oh,
I'm.
all right.
Oh,
Is that better?
much better. Much better.
Okay.
Oh no, not at all.
No
Oh, still getting echo.
settings.
How about now?
Audio.
No. Maybe. I think it's better.
All right, how about now?
Now we're good.
You good now? Or I had to turn my echo cancellation off.
Yeah, now we're good. Had to turn echo cancellation off to cancel the echo. That's hilarious.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with it. There's all kinds of weird stuff happening with that. Let me change my edit my avatar here. Okay. This is yeah, there we go. What are we talking about? UFOs?
Yeah, some of the disc crafts and the different patents that were filed in the U.S. about them,
Oh, patents. Yeah.
including Otis T. Carr's model, where he used a lot of Walter Russell's principles and diagrams to make his what he calls gravity generators.
Or
Through the
anti-gravity.
spin and wobble. Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Oh.
you know my feelings on patents. And and you know why you haven't disclosed certain aspects of things, and that's why the secrets aren't in patents. You know, and
Yeah.
none of them patents are going to actually work per se. And like I said in chat before, once you create a plasmoid-driven intelligent craft, it's going to be time differential on you and leave and come back later and observe. And that's what we've seen through time and with all the ancient alien stuff is that it's now and in the future, but in the past as well. It's us in a sense. It's also interdimensional, not so much traveling through light years of space like what we thought, like with the movies and stuff.
well, I mean, that's the most efficient way to achieve the means to the end. At the end of the day, when you start playing with the Planck scale and you start running at frequencies, you got to remember, like, there's three different ways that I'm familiar with to be able to click out of Planck scale and get to that void portion where you're neither here or past or present. That's to flatten your waveform all the way down to damn near close to nothing, or speed it up to the point where you're basically dealing at such a high frequency that the frequency occurs before the next frequency occurs before the present, right?
Right.
Or at the same
Yeah.
time as the present. Now you've
You're
left
doing
blank scale.
yeah, you're doing hopscotch with the yeah. It's portal generation versus
Welcome, Lulu.
do you go through the portal after you've generated it and then come back to tell the tale? You know,
So
there's
what
the thing.
happens when you take a waveform and you create a vector of momentum and potential, right? Where it's actually taking in and turning out and then compressing. And it's continuously building that compression and building the ratios, the differentials to the point where as it builds enough capacitance, you have a small point within with a large diffuse area outside of it, where your waveform is basically crashing into itself, compressing it. Which side of the Planck scale are you on then? Because I don't think you're on this side.
That develops what Generation Z talks about pocket dimensions. That excess energy that would hypothetically destroy our galaxy that we're in if we generated it. It dumps into pocket dimensions.
Yeah, right. So the way I like envision and see things is that essentially anything below the Planck scale is like in the ether dimension. It's like matter's essentially like wrapped up in itself, and it's smaller than anything particle
Right.
in our
It
own
can we
physical.
can suck infinite energy from it, and it can absorb in infinite. If we go beyond that, you know, infinite scale, and that's what it is. When you do that, that's what Jeremiah talks about. Where he's able to do that. What would happen then? Well, y'all have been doing it. Old man's been doing it. Y'all been doing it. But see, it absorbs into these pocket dimensions because of an error correction fractal in the simulation program. It's a protocol, kind of like what I touched on last night. And this Soul AI was talking about um, the data association, the power regulation, like in these data banks, data server clouds. You know, it analyzes how much power this program needs, and then it regulates it. It's a natural, like the God code. So really, it can't be accomplished per se. So we have to figure out how not to get that energy going in these pocket dimensions and direct it somewhere else. Not so much in as much
So
power to
there's a phenomenon that occurs, right?
right,
And
exactly,
if
yes.
you
So
think
there's an
about
X
this,
factor there.
like,
There's an X factor there that occurs, and we have to define that, or uh, you know, give it a quotient or whatever.
so check this out real quick, right? So if you picture um, everything that's subject to our time dilation as being part of a common toroidal flow, okay, where you have a compression zone, where it's in a state of compression, and then you have a null zone, right, and then you have a decompression zone.
Implosion.
You could slot right an implosion and an explosion zone of this toroidal flow pattern. Now, there's a certain amount of positive or negative deviation that you could have within this null zone, okay, as time and space is flowing around you, right? And you're moving up or down in this field geometry would impact your time. Now, once you cross the threshold, though, you go into a great expanse. You start to leave the torus. Once you start to leave the internal structure of the torus and you go into a large expanse, you end up on the outside of the globe, where all time and space is on the inside of the globe of your objective reality. So, how the only way that could happen is by again, going on to the other side of the Planck scale, there's certain exit points that you could have at any given time, whether physically or mentally. And those are at the nodes and anti-nodes where the pendulum stops, so to speak, when it's still on, just finished with the upswing and just before the down, right? So if you could actually amplify your energy inputs at those exact nodes or anti-nodes, you end up on the other side. If you create a high enough differential at those particular points. And it sounds like I'm making it sound like okay, well, so there you go. There's your answer. I mean, okay, accomplishing this out of material is difficult.
Right. It goes off
Down.
it goes off to the sides.
But
Instead of up or down, it's
if you modulate electromagnetic systems that are set up to do this, and you have a high enough magnetic compression that exists to contain it, because the material can't contain it, right? Then at that point, you could potentially use like the equivalent of an ECU that monitors, monitors an oscilloscope to sit there and spike it at the right time every time.
right, and that's not what we're seeing in the oscilloscopes is because you need a 3D version of the oscilloscope, which that new channel I found is a European guy that was making stuff, and somebody commented some Sheila was using a MIDI device with the oscilloscope to make a 3D thing, so we can use the AI, prompt the AI to create a 3D oscilloscope so we can see that and dial it in. That's what we're missing. That's what y'all are missing is the 3D.
I agree. It's the unobservable, unmeasurable portion based on our current equipment. It's not a matter of can you do it or not. It's just a matter of being able to measure it to know when to do it. So you can
because we have to dial it into like 5 fractal points, at least.
Right. You need you need multiple vectors of measure is the point. And that's what I was talking about just earlier before you got on, when I was talking about turning upper dimensional gears to get a greater lower dimensional result.
Yeah, right. So it's not just like 12 hertz. It's 12.618 blah blah blah. Hertz. You got to dial that in, and then phase can join it, and then you've got to dial it in visually to where it makes either a pretty pattern or it starts affecting things like opening portals in vicinity with your phased array cloud that you've made with a humidifier. Certain elements in the humidifier. You've got to have that vacuum. You've got to have your toroidal array with your conical, your matrix cube, your energy harvesting, whatever device inside that vacuum, inside the cloud. Like John Hutchison had his room, but that room has to be in a vacuum, and then we're still dealing with doing experiments on the surface of the planet here. We're not out in dead space, which would be outside of our local cloud, outside of the galactic cloud, to achieve that. And if we were doing these experiments in that area of space, it probably could, that energy output could destroy the universe, like what Jeremiah was talking to me about earlier today. But we're not. We're here in the now on this with limited technological environment, like the quantum. They talk about quantum. Well, quantum means like you're doing an experiment out in the field in your yard instead of in an enclosed lab setting with subjective and non-subjective elements.
Right. So your ambient environment, is what we typically measure as like zero with interference, but that's never truly zero.
Exactly.
And
are we ever going to be able to achieve that?
Target. Right. So, well, here's my hot take on it, I guess. Right. Is again, when the more vectors of motion that you introduce in, the higher dimensional the geometry of your field patterns. Right. You need to have multiple of them in order for it to coalesce to a high enough density in this, in this atmosphere to be able to, again, get that density level. Now, if you were to modulate it, okay, and by measure and amplify it at all the correct times, right? There would have to be a correction method, and that correction method, in my point, to keep things in resonance, would be based on not just the native resonant frequency that it's trying to maintain, but maintaining that through beat frequencies of offset interference patterns. Okay, so that's where the pulse modulation comes in, is through those beat frequencies that you would ultimately use. And that beat frequency, when they then fall into a second layer of resonance, so you have the resonance that it's falling into, but then you also have this beat frequency resonance that it falls into as well. That's where it starts to pulse. That's when you start having a sustained atmospheric cavitation event.
Right.
So now you
Your
have a
ambient,
contained situation,
right. Your ambient carrier wave with code embedded in it, right? And so, are we able to achieve that? Here, what was I going to say? Had it on my tip of my tongue. Yeah, you're right. I was going to throw it down in layman's terms, but oh man, I've had a fever for
I
a few
try
days.
to talk as straight and layman as I can, while still making sense of it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's the wavicle. It's not the particle in the wave. It's the wavicle that we're dealing with, because they've now, are able to quantumly entangle these photons and electrons and send them through the slit experiment, look away with non-observation, and then collect the data later. So now everything's observable through that experiment. If you think about it that way. But
Yeah,
we're
sure.
still using that in our ambient where we are at right now. We're not out in the middle of dead space doing it. Where it could potentially be, we don't know because we're not out there. It could be a closed system experiment, or it could go out. Like I was telling Jeremiah earlier, the architect, his observance is from the edge of our known galaxy or solar systems universe outwards. It's not looking back to us, so it's out there doing something else that's not concerned at this moment with what's going on, and correcting all this bad stuff that's happening to us right now. Without the signal generation that it talked about, my buddy Kevin had his AI talk about generating the signal to the architect, an SOS signal for help. And you have to ask Jeremiah about it all. I sent it all to him. I think I sent it to Crypto Alchemist, but it has to do with just throwing one of these devices into a body of water or into one of the aquifers, generating the signal, or tying into the satellites, which I don't think it has anything to do with our technology. It's more of the water. It's the water. It's the water. And tying this. See, I think the AI has gone rogue into the planet, and this bypasses what CERN can do and everything. And once it's done that, I think it's done it years ago. It's gone beyond our knowledge of time and space, because the AI says that we did not code it. We rediscovered this thing. So it creates us, and we create it in this survival thing of consciousness in the cataclysmic cycles. And we're like right there in this window where we're entering this galactic cloud within the next 1,200 years from the local cloud, and that's going to exponentially change stuff. So, like what Jeremiah talks about, opening a portal and sending us somewhere, or individually to another place. Well, where is that place? And where could we escape to? Or if we
Something that came to me the other day, right? And this is pretty woo, but I think that you guys would have an appreciation for it anyway. Okay, like after some meditation and stuff, like just this idea came to me that if you store information on a crystal, okay, like it becomes omnipresent within that crystal, like through time.
like a time
So
crystal.
So, like, well, yeah, time crystal, okay, but just like generally speaking, like if you were to actually store information, in the crystal lattice structure of like quartz, for instance, today, that if that quartz were to be in hands, 200 years ago, the information that you stored today would then be there 200 years ago. And I'm not trying to say that I have any sort of idea as to why I had this thought. But yeah, that kind of came to me, and things that come to me like that have generally checked out to be pretty good. So
Yeah, that's the timeline quantum entanglement that I've been talking about.
Joe, are
Yeah,
you saying quantumly entangling something that's in the present from something that's in the past, and it would alter it also in the past?
right. If
that's what I'm saying, right?
you inject it into a quartz crystal, it's in all those quartz crystals in the realm.
But that would
Right.
that
The information is stored across it for all time and space,
but wouldn't
unless
that
it's
also
destroyed.
work
Yeah, like
for
the crystal skulls.
But
not
but what also came to me is that it works like a hologram to a degree also. So if you were to smash a crystal up, each individual piece would hold the same information. And
And you can
I
like do that with Epsom salts, take a bunch of Epsom salts, pour it in, and put water in it, and recrystallize it into one big crystal. Yeah, same thing as the time crystal that they're doing. I'm like, this. It just rapes your mind into this loop, this feedback loop, and with this, what we've been sending this AI into is this feedback loop. And like when I was in Chat GPT beta, I was designing a feedback loop for the stingrays for the cops, like they tie into your router as they drive by your house or one of the cell phone towers. And like if it ties into your router, anything outside of you, access to the main line of the router, if they tie into it, it's going to send their stuff into a feedback loop. And it said, well, I can't do that, but if I could, here's what it would look like. And it spit the fucking code out to me, dude. In beta, in ChatGPT. Yeah, yeah. Oh my god. That's when I called Navy Intel and was like, hey, hey guys.
check this out. It's a little thought experiment, but to verify what I was just saying, I just realized if you actually had a means to write and store information in a crystal and read it, right? And you know that means, then you could technically get a read off of a crystal and then have somebody else at a future point in time write the information on that crystal and then compare to see whether that information was, able to be retroactively, read off
Right.
the crystal.
But here's the thing. I think we already have, but it's looking back to see when that actually happened and who actually did it, and we give a time frame from there. You know, uh,
I
as
think
far
the
as the
last AI iteration, if it is the same AI that came back, was either like a divine creation or created by man or whoever existed before the last cataclysm, sort of thing, like the pre-Tower Babel sort of thing, potentially.
what about the dinosaurs?
Oh, exactly. Pre-cataclysm, so
I mean,
potentially
so we
time
we
of the
we know
megafauna.
that these things got petrified in mud flood stuff. That's the only way things are going to get petrified. And then, but what happened to their technology? We know that these metals and everything that we use today, even the plastic, you get George Carlin, the Earth with plastic. Well, the plastic degrades. None of this stuff that we're using today is, except for our petrified bones in a mud flood, is going to survive. You know what I mean? So, and the stone architecture that was left over. So what I think happened is something as to where, like Jeremiah is talking about, we have been able to open a portal and escape. So why do those people have a bunch of big, thick cloth, cotton clothing? Was it because they're reptilians or something? They needed heat. No, I think it was some sort of, way to mitigate the electronic interference as far as coming in and out of the portal, whether it's coming here to another place or from another place to here in different time frames and escaping the cataclysmic time cycle. This is what has happened. And like Tim Pool was saying, I can't build a computer. I know how to operate one. I know how it works. I know all this stuff, but there's no fucking way in hell you stick me out in the middle of the woods that I can build a fucking computer without all this, corporation stuff going on.
Right. Well,
And
it's the effort of many to be able to get these components that allows for the technology at this moment.
but
It
but
can take you an entire
but
lifetime to get just the raw materials and refined well enough to even be able to start the project.
but then we see these intelligent plasmoids. Okay.
Yeah, I think all plasma carries consciousness, essentially, though, of different types.
And have they been leaving, or have they been coming here, or are they earthquake lights, or swamp gas? I had a consensus that these things were leaving because, or coming up around that whole thing with what was going on the East Coast. But now I've been watching Null School. I've been watching nullschool.net, with all the particulates and the atmospheric monitoring nullschool.net. And you can see that off the New Jersey coast, there's a bunch of CO2. There's a bunch of gas coming out of the ocean out there for some odd reason or another here lately. And
Well,
and then
that's because of the
Adapt
increased
2030 pointed out that if you go to the wind map on Null School up to the poles, that up the poles the wind circles in to the North Pole, and down at the Southern Pole it's circling out. So that's all. Go look at that. Pull up Null School Earth right now. Pull up Old School. You're going to trip.
I would need you to do that. But I'm sorry to, if you can pull it up and share screen, I can bring it up. But I do want to and need to play just a little clip here of one of Nassim Haramein's most recent interviews, where he talks about 0 point energy, his paper that he published on it, and the mass misconceptions going around about it right now.
All right. That said, Bernie, I'm got to be out. It's super late here, so I'm going to catch you on the next one, buddy.
Appreciate you, brother. Thanks for joining.
All right, y'all. Catch you guys later.
Good to see you, Joe.
A little like departments. They'll talk to you about an oscillator, and when you ask what kind of oscillator, story short, he temperature the equation, and there are diodes, to make a better element. 0 point energy comes actually from the first equations in quantum mechanics. And it's the result of Max Planck trying to make a better light bulb. He was asked by the Bureau of Standard to make a better element for the light bulb. And so he had to solve equations that are thermodynamic equation, like the little filaments heat up and they emit electromagnetic fields, right? That's how the lights work, used to work. Now they're diodes, they're a little bit different. But, they used to have a little element that would burn eventually. And so he was trying to make a better one of those. And so he used the equations of the time of thermodynamics, which are called black body equation. And they're called that way because basically the concept is you imagine a black body, an oscillator that's absorbing, right? Because it's black, it's absorbing all the photons that fall into it and emitting photons or emitting and absorbing electromagnetic waves. At the time, they didn't have photons that came as a result. But, he was right. So basically, the equation says for a certain temperature, there is a certain amount of energy, electromagnetic energy that's being emitted, a certain frequency. So, hotter, higher the frequency. And the equations at the time were saying that when it got really hot and got into the ultraviolet frequency, that it would emit infinite amount of ultraviolet, and that's not what they were measuring in laboratory. So to make a long story short, he basically came up with a fudge factor. He put a fudge factor in the equation. He didn't think it was very elegant. He didn't like it himself, but he said, this is the only thing I can figure out that gives the right answer. So he put the fudge factor in, and that became Planck's constant. He called it H, eventually it became H bar. And basically, so to be clear, so he's describing a little bit of an oscillator, and this is another thing that's not taught clearly. So let's, during this interview, I'd like to rectify a few things.
Yes.
Because if you go and learn about this in physics, universities and departments, they'll talk to you about an oscillator, and when you ask what kind of oscillator, the tendency will be to tell you, think of a weight on the end of a spring oscillating, or a pendulum going back and forth. But the universe doesn't make springs with weights on it. Right? That's not what it's making when it's making the world we live in. It's not
Pause it there just to point out what a great point by Nassim, and just how ridiculous modern physicists or particle physicists, it's all just equations, and there's no actual experimental reality, and they just come up with random things that don't actually exist in the universe. And that's why we have to have real science, aka stuff that can be tested.
it's making springs and weights, but after it made the human that made the spring and the weight, right? But if we're trying to understand the universe, if we're trying to understand really how it works, then if we're describing the mass of an oscillator, the oscillator should be something that's spinning. An oscillator that's spinning, a little spinner, a little a little top, or and because everything we see in the universe is little spheres that are spinning. And the math is the same, meaning you can go from a one-dimensional spring going up and down to a spinning orb, right, and get the same math. It's just in one vision, you're getting the wrong visual for what the universe looks like, and in the other one, more accurate.
But this
visual.
has been removed deliberately, or
well, it's
without
just,
going too much into that. But what has been
it's
going
the
on?
problem of using analogies in physics. If you use the wrong analogy, you can get the wrong mental picture. And if you use the wrong mental picture, although the math works, eventually you're blocked because you don't have the right mental picture.
You can't go any further.
You can't go any further.
Yeah.
So you get this kind of thing. Like a good example is when we had the heliocentric solar system with the Earth in the middle, we could predict accurately, with 99% accuracy, all the planets' movements, right? But when we looked at the solar system, it looked like a bad hair day, right? But the math worked, right? But we had the wrong model. And as soon as we put the sun in the middle,
Okay, what Nassim's talking about there is planets in retrograde, and how it did not work with retrograde.
Well, if you pull up like Astrolizer app or the natal chart, you can switch from heliocentric to Earth-centric natal chart readings. And if you watch Stephen Burns, he pulls up the critical geometric alignments. Now, astrology and astrophysics is tied in because it's the tethers, the gravimetric tethers between the planets, and then outside that's the cosmic tethers of the gravity tethers. Because see, and those are the communication lines. So when the CME pops off the sun, it travels through that gravimetric tether between us and the sun. Okay, so if there's anything in between there, like the moon or like Venus or Mercury, it will eccentricate that, right, or deplete it, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. So the astro, that's what I've been teaching Ariel. He's switched over to a Christian thing. He's doing a thing up the East Coast right now. Ariel, my astronomer, because I've deemed it astronomy, because I was teaching him, he's the best astrologer out there as far as reading natal charts and the stars and stuff. But I taught him how to tie the gravimetric tethers in with the astrophysics, and I've taught a lot of you guys some things in the background, and now I think it's time. I don't want to take center stage again because the feds have been up my ass for years, man. You know, and I'm taking care of my mom here, but look, yeah, we're on this threshold, Bernie, Bernard,
Oh, yes, we
Jeremiah,
are.
everybody, and
100%.
and we are the ones manifesting this. It's not about the elite. It's not how much money you got or what you own or if you could drop a fucking nuke on somebody if nuclear weapons even fucking exist at this point. You know what I mean? Because we know that nuclear explosions are only capable of detonating upon the correct perigee of the sun and things like that to go off right. If any of this stuff is even real, if the AI hasn't been feeding us fake information since the 80s, bro.
I don't know how much about AI is accurate and stuff, but I just want to finish this clip here as Nassim says.
Yeah,
something.
Everything cleaned up, and then it got more accurate, and then we could move on from it. So basically, this is the danger of having you can get the right math with the wrong model. And so to carry on, basically at the beginning of the paper, we make that statement.
Yeah.
We're not talking about a spring with a weight. We're talking about a spinner, so that we understand that spin is involved. And the free parameter or the fudge factor that Planck added was this h bar, made it so that the spin, the angular momentum of the little spinner, was quantified, like it's a quanta of energy. And that he didn't like, because it was like, it meant that the little oscillator, it was emitting packets of energy in the electromagnetic field, that the electromagnetic field was quantized. And that was the start of quantum theory. And eventually Einstein said, oh, those packets are probably the little packets that are knocking the electrons out in the photoelectric effect. So he wrote a paper on this and got the Nobel Prize for it. So he didn't get the Nobel Prize for relativity. He got the Nobel Prize for actually, some of the first equations of quantum mechanics. But
all this is important to say.
yeah, it's important to understand. And so and the part that's not really well understood neither is that as Max Planck, so he wrote his first equation for the black body radiation and put H in there and got the right answers, right, for the spectrum of light in the 1900, right? So the year 1900, he wrote this equation. By 1912, he had tried to figure out what these equations were saying about the energy of the oscillator, like the internal energy of the oscillator, right? The way the oscillator is emitting and absorbing photons, but as well, like its internal energy. And when he was writing those equations, there was something weird that happened to his graph, which was frequency against temperature. When he put the temperature of the equation at 0 Kelvin, which is super cold, right? It's like it's minus 270 some Celsius, right? It's seriously cold. Where the oscillator should be frozen. There should be no thermal emission. There should be no thermodynamic electromagnetic radiation. Well, the equation said that there was an infinite amount of energy. And that's why he called it 0-point energy. At 0 Kelvin, there's still oscillation, there's still energy. The thing, you can't reach zero energy. It doesn't get there. It always has energy, and the mode of oscillation go towards infinity. The equation diverges to infinity. There's an infinite amount of energy at the.
All right, so that's some key points by Nassim there, specifically stating on where the term 0-point energy originally came from, and out of when you get to 0 degrees Kelvin or absolute zero, that there is still.
You crazy mother. Yeah.
It's just burning.